We reported previously last week on the controversy surrounding the fact that the Trump administration during the campaign promised to mass deport illegal people in the United States illegally. And deportations typically means, in fact always means, picking people up who are in your country illegally and sending them back to their country of origin. They get a very quick hearing in basically a quasi-court, a deportation court inside the Justice Department, as long as the government can show they don't have the legal papers to be in the United States and the person can't show they have the legal documents, the deportation is approved and they get sent back to their home country. And the Trump administration is doing some of that, not nearly at the levels promised, but they're doing some of it. But they're doing something much, much different, which is that they're picking people up, primarily Venezuelans up until now, and they're not sending them back to Venezuela. They're sending them to a third country that these people have nothing to do with, that they're not citizens of, that in most, if not all cases, they've never visited, which is El Salvador. And the United States government is paying the government of El Salvador not to accept them, but to incarcerate them in one of the most horrific prisons that exist in the world, to film them being humiliated and dehumanized, all based on the accusation that the Trump administration refuses to prove that these people are members of a violent gang, Tren de Aragua, based on the invocation of war powers that has only been used 3 times previously in actual wars: the war in 1812, the War of 1812, World War I, World War II. But even then, the people who were ordered under the Alien Enemies Act to be deported got a hearing. And yet the Trump administration is sending these people, including people who have obviously compelling cases that they're not part of this gang, that they've been mistaken for gang members, just like the U.S. told us during Guantanamo, the war on terror, that only the worst of the worst were there, and it turned out many of the people there had nothing to do with terrorism. They were innocent. They were part of mistaken identity. Any number of reasons why. That's what happens when you don't give people due process. You imprison people unjustly. And a federal district court judge ordered that this stop, that no detainees be delivered to El Salvador without first getting a hearing. And the Trump administration rushed to move them there, brought 237 of them there, refused to turn the plane around. And a lot of Trump supporters have been complaining, oh, this is just a single federal judge. Who is he to order the president to stop some policy based on his belief that it's unconstitutional or illegal, even though, as we showed you on Monday night, that's how our system works. Conservatives have often got injunctions from single district court judges to stop Biden policy, to stop Obama policy, to stop Clinton policy. But the DOJ appealed that injunction, so it's not before just a single district judge now. It's before the U.S. Court of Appeals, which is the highest appellate court in the country. It's right below the Supreme Court in terms of prestige. And they held an oral argument on Monday, and we played a lot of that for you, or some of it, in which we showed you how antagonistic, how adversarial, how aggressive the judges on the panel were being toward the Trump Justice Department's arguments about why they have the legal authority to do this, and made quite clear that it's extremely likely that the appellate court would uphold that injunction, so that now it's not just a single federal court judge, it's the most prestigious appellate court in the country, right below the Supreme Court, that's doing so. And the 3 judges were an Obama appointee, a George H.W. Bush appointee, and a Trump appointee. And the decision that they issued today was a 2-to-1 decision, which upheld this injunction that the federal district court issued, ordered the Trump administration not to deport anyone else back to El Salvador, at least not without hearings. And even the judge in dissent, the Trump judge, emphasized that every single illegal alien, people inside the United States illegally, that the Trump administration proposes to send to a prison in a foreign country has a right to a habeas corpus hearing, to an opportunity to prove that he's being unjustly accused. The only reason he dissented was he said that the case should have been brought where they were detained and not in Washington. But on the substance of whether they have a due process right, the dissenting judge agreed. There was essentially 3-0 on that question. Here you see the ruling. It says, it is further ordered that the emergency motions for stay be denied. Separate concurring judgments of Judge Henderson, that's the Bush 41 judge, and Judge Millett, the Obama judge, and a dissenting statement of Judge Walker are attached. And this was from the ruling of Judge Henderson, the Bush 41 judge who ruled against the Trump DOJ. She wrote, quote, the Alien Enemies Act, AEA, contains two provisions, a conditional clause and an operative clause. The conditional clause limits the AEA's substantive authority to conflicts between the United States and a foreign power. Specifically, there must, quote, be, quote, there must be one, a declared war between the United States and any foreign nation or government, or two, an invasion of predatory incursion perpetrated, attempted, or threatened against the territory of the United States by any foreign nation or government, and three, a presidential public proclamation of the event. She went on, a central limit to this power is the act's conditional clause that the United States be at war or under invasion or predatory incursion. And she talked about how the only times it had ever been enacted was during traditional wars, the War of 1812, World War I, World War II, how the founders enacted it specifically to confront a possible war, then the quasi-war that they ended up fighting with the French. And everything in the record of this law was that it needed to be invoked or needed to be available solely in the case of an actual war. And she went on to say that she's not issuing an opinion about whether or not there can be an invasion, but that the likelihood of victory is with the plaintiffs because she doesn't believe the AEA is applicable to fighting a few hundred members of a violent gang. That's not what the Alien Enemies Act is for. And that's an important limitation on the law because this law gives the president enormous powers, very extraordinary powers. And that's why we have to be very careful about the president's ability to just declare war. Otherwise, the Constitution has no purpose. Bush and Cheney claimed war powers because they were fighting the war on terror. Any president could just say, we're at war, and now I have the ability to do everything. But Judge Millett, the Obama judge, emphasized that even under the AEA, the people who are ordered by the president deported always have a due process right and always did, even the people accused of being Nazi sympathizers in World War II. Here's what she wrote. Judicial review has always been available to non-citizens detained or removed under the AEA. During the War of 1812, Chief Justice John Marshall and Federal District Judge St. George Tucker ordered a British subject released because the local marshal had acted beyond his delegated authority by detaining the plaintiff without proper notice. And then she cites the histories of these cases in which even people who are detained under these laws have been given due process. She then went on, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, we can go on. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court later agreed with the Chief Justice that those subject to the AEA are entitled to judicial review, and she cited a 1813 case from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that during the war in 1812, people ordered by the president removed have a right to a hearing to contest the accusations against them that they are really a threat. The judge went on, quote, these early cases set a precedent followed during the 20th century. Review was available during World War I, cites a 1919 case in a federal district judge, as well as World War II, citing a U.S. Supreme Court ruling in 1948 that stated, quote, hearings are utilized by the executive to secure an informed basis for the exercise of summary power. She went on, quote, indeed, during World War II, a former member of the Nazi Party not only received a hearing on his eligibility for removal, but also had his case heard by the Supreme Court. And she ruled that this removal is unconstitutional because, as the Supreme Court ruled, even for detainees in Guantanamo, you cannot consign people to prison Even if they're in your country illegally, even if they're not citizens, you cannot put people in prison based on an allegation that they're terrorists, they're involved in a terrorist organization, that they're a violent member of a violent drug gang, without giving the accused, the person you want to put in prison, the opportunity to demonstrate that the accusations are false, that they've gotten the wrong person, or to present evidence that convinces a court that they've been wrongly accused. This is foundational to the American system, even in wartime. Now, what's interesting is the Trump-appointed judge, Judge Walker, did dissent. But as I said, he dissented mostly on the grounds of where the case was brought. He said it shouldn't have been brought in Washington, but in Texas. You have to bring it in the place where the people are detained, not where the government officials are. And in his dissent, he said this, quote, "The two sides of this case agree on very little. But what is at this point uncontested is that, quote, individuals identified as alien enemies may challenge that status in a habeas petition." And as I said, he went on to say that should have been brought in Texas, not Washington, therefore he would have dismissed the case. He also said that there's delicate diplomacy, according to the government, going on between Venezuela and El Salvador and the United States, and that a ruling like this might disrupt those diplomatic relations, and therefore the equities are on the side of lifting the injunction. But all three of these judges agreed with the court point that you cannot send people to an unrelated country based on an accusation that you haven't proven or given them an opportunity to contest. And as we've gone over, there's 150 years Supreme Court history that says that the Bill of Rights is not a list of protections given solely to a small group of people called American citizens. It is intended to be a constraint on what the U.S. government does and can do with respect to everyone under their control. If the Trump administration wants to do mass deportation, they convinced Americans to vote for that. Polls show people favor that. And if they were deporting people back to their home country, none of this would be an issue. But when you change that to something far more radical, sending people based on interpretations of their tattoos or the flimsiest evidence that you haven't even presented to a court, and you accuse people of being violent criminals and send them to a prison designed to be one of the worst and most destructive and humiliating and dehumanizing prisons in the entire world, where the El Salvadorian government has said they may never leave, they may be here for life. Not just basic human rights, but our Constitution, our laws, our precedent, as all three judges agreed, including the Trump-appointed judge, require that they be given an opportunity to contest the charges against them. This should not even be controversial, and yet it has become such, because if you sufficiently dehumanize people, and this is what we saw in the war on terror, if the government just labels them terrorists without proving it, even if it's wrong, enough people will say, oh, these people are animals, they're not even humans, they deserve no rights. Kill them, torture them, kidnap them, put them in prison for life, they don't need a trial. And that is always what the founders feared most, was that the government would raise the fear level sufficiently so that people would give away their own liberties. Remember Benjamin Franklin, and this isn't apocryphal, this is documented, when he left the Constitutional Convention, was asked by a woman, what is it that you did in there? And he said, we created a republic if you can keep it. Knowing that the biggest danger to the Bill of Rights would be that citizens, the population, would be manipulated or fear-mongered into giving up those rights. And that's what typically happens. We see this all the time, and that's what's happening now. And now the appellate court, it's not just one judge, it's a 3-judge appellate court, has ruled that doing this without a hearing or even invoking the law to justify it is likely to fail on the merits, and therefore these deportations are still enjoined, not by one judge, but by a 3-judge panel. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.